Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie, and I'm recording this video at 9:30 a.m. on December the 14th, 2023, and that is Pacific time because I'm in Washington State. And in this video, I want to talk about Hunter Biden. Now, a lot of people have requested that I look at his chart. I have already looked at his chart, but the last time I looked at his chart, there was no time of birth, so that kind of limited me to what I could actually say. So now the time of birth has actually come out. Now let me just show you what my source for his time of birth. It's a sort of interesting source, so I will show you. Okay, so this is a website that I use a lot, which I would strongly recommend, which is the astro.com website. So this, it has this Astro data bank, which has a huge data bank of websites, a huge data bank of birth charts, and it gives a rating for the time. So, for example, if a time is rated as an X, it means there's no time at all. If it's rated as a D, I think that suggests it's dodgy data. Yeah, there is a time, but we can't really trust it. The best possible rating is AA, and I think that means that it comes from the birth certificate. So here we have Hunter Biden's data. So it says here, Hunter Biden, born 4th of February 1970 at 13:46, which is 1:46 p.m. in Wilmington, Delaware, and it's given the best rating of all, which is AA. So I did want to check on the source, and the source is quite interesting. So source notes. So Cy Schofield quotes birth notice, the News Journal, Wilmington, Delaware, 5th of February 1970, page 64, born at Wilmington General, no time given. On the 1st of September 2023, an ADB user sent a copy of a photo of Biden's birth certificate, allegedly found among the infamous Hunter Biden laptop leak photo collection. That gives a birth time of 1:46 p.m. So given that this website gives this an AA rating, I'm going to go with this time, 13:46. So we've got a time to work with. So let's now look at the chart. So here we go. This is Hunter Biden's horoscope. And we can see that he has got 1 degree 28 Cancer rising, that's his chart. So what stands out about this horoscope? To me, the first thing that stands out is his Mars-Uranus opposition. So he's got Mars at 8 degrees 1 Aries, and he's got Uranus at 8:34 Libra. So, a Mars-Uranus opposition is quite violent. It's quite tempestuous. This is someone who is looking for action. This is someone who perhaps doesn't have a great deal of stability in his life. And I'm thinking that this Mars-Uranus opposition is really about tragedy. I mean, it started off with a tragedy because on December the 18th, 1972, a couple of months before his 3rd birthday, he was involved in a car crash. His mother was driving. I think his brother Bo and his sister were in the car. So it's just before Christmas. I think he was doing Christmas shopping. There was a car crash. From what I gather, it was his mother's fault, but I think she may have strayed into a different lane or something like that. Um, and yeah, his sister was killed, his mother was killed, and he and his brother Bo were seriously injured. So I'm thinking that this is really how the Mars Uranus opposition started its work. And one must emphasize that if someone has had that kind of experience, it will scar them for life. That will kind of I would guess, it will determine who he becomes. It's like after that, I think it might be very difficult to recover from something like that. So that's his Mars-Uranus opposition. So that's one aspect of the chart. Another aspect of the chart is his moon. Moon in Capricorn. That moon in Capricorn moon in Capricorn, quite self-interested. Someone who is probably quite interested in their own financial well-being, the financial well-being perhaps of themselves, their immediate family. So there is a self-interest there. The moon, of course, is the natural ruler of the mother, and unfortunately, the moon is in the 8th house, the house of death. So that kind of fits. That fits what we know. The moon is additionally, is exactly semi-square the midheaven. So there's the midheaven at 8:52 Pisces. The moon is at 23:57 Capricorn, so they're exactly 45 degrees apart. So moon is highly sort of configured there with that 45-degree aspect. And the midheaven, of course, is the mother. So the moon, the midheaven is one signifier of the mother. The moon is another signifier, natural ruler of the mother. The moon is in the 8th house, 45 degrees from the midheaven. This psychological issue around the moon and the mother, and in fact the moon is in the 8th house, may have an impact on his career and the way he moves forward in life. This is someone who is motivated by really, I think, very deep emotions. And as I said, it's not surprising, given this huge trauma he had just before his 3rd birthday. He carries it with him. And I think we can definitely see this. In his chart. Another problem in this chart is the fact that he has got a Sun-Venus conjunction. Now, I have talked about the Sun-Venus conjunction quite a lot. His father. No, sorry, I should really show his father's chart as well. I should have had that up anyway. So his father. Whoops. Okay. You see, his father has a very close Sun-Venus conjunction. Again, I've talked about that Sun-Venus conjunction in the past. An example. Sun-Venus. Venus is a universal significator of women, and so Sun-Venus conjunction in a man's chart can indicate someone who doesn't treat women well. And of course, the biggest example in Joe Biden's life of him not treating a woman well was with sort of Anita Hill. That was during, I think it was the early 90s, when Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was being, there was all the congressional, whatever, investigations, hearings, where they were going to confirm his appointment as a Supreme Court Justice. And Joe Biden was involved in this, and he was incredibly dismissive of Anita Hill's allegations about how Clarence Thomas's treatment of Anita Hill in terms of sexual advances and so forth. And that was a real blot on Joe Biden's political reputation. But the Sun Venus can be sort of more obvious. Sun is the woman. Sorry, Venus is the woman in his life. Sun Venus being blotted out. That is in a way an indication of a wife, his first wife, dying, having a Sun Venus conjunction or being killed. Now we go back to Hunter Biden's chart, and we can see Sun Venus conjunction. We might see this as how the Sun Venus is his mother. We will shortly get further evidence of this. Venus is his mother. His Sun is his mother being blotted out, being killed in this accident. So that gives us more issues and more evidence about what happened. And I don't know how does in general does Hunter Biden treat women? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question. Maybe you have your own ideas. But if you, in terms of his treatment of women, look at that Sun Venus conjunction. Generationally, he was born Jupiter-Saturn opposition. He has 1970, early 1970, there was a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. That's the generation he was born. It was 1970. It was, when the good times of the 60s were coming to an end. Jupiter-Saturn very connected with the business cycle. You've got Jupiter is trying to advance forward, expansive. Saturn is discipline, financial reality. These were the times he was born into. Now, I would maintain, when looking at Hunter Biden's chart, that you could quite possibly predict that something very difficult would happen when he was 3 years old. And I think one could predict this by eye, not having to use, sophisticated techniques. Now, let me show you what I mean. Now, look at Pluto, for example. 27 degrees to Virgo. So you can see that Pluto is almost exactly 3 degrees from the cardinal point of 0 degrees Aries. You'd agree with me there? Yes, I think that's true. Now let's look at the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Now there's Jupiter. Now arguably Jupiter is ruler of the mother, of his mother, because he's got Pisces on the midheaven. In Western astrology, most Western astrologers assign the 10th house to the mother, the 4th house to the father. So, ruler of the 10th house, we've got Pisces on the 10th house cusp. Ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. It's not Neptune, that's a modernism, it's Jupiter. There's Jupiter. And you can see that Saturn is at 259 Taurus. So Saturn is about 2.5 degrees separated from the opposition to Jupiter. Okay, so we've got Pluto is kind of 3 degrees from the Aries point. Saturn is 2.5 degrees from Jupiter. And then remember that Sun-Venus conjunction I was just talking about, which I really kind of associated perhaps with the initial disaster of losing his mother. This Sun-Venus conjunction is around 2.5, just over 2.5 degrees apart. So you've got the symbolic measure. 1 degree equals 1 year. So around 3 years old, you might have expected some kind of event relating to Pluto on the Aries point. The Aries point is the world at large. Pluto is about sort of a dramatic sort of transformation. Of course, his father is a public figure. Then we've got Jupiter, Saturn coming to Jupiter after about 2.5 degrees. Saturn is restriction, can be about death, moving to the opposition of Jupiter, which is his mother. And then finally, we've got the Sun and Venus approximately 3 degrees apart. The Sun clicks forward 3 degrees and it comes to the position of Venus, universal significator of women. So I think in that horoscope, we do potentially have a significator. We do potentially have evidence that something really bad was going to happen when he was about 2.5 years old, 3 years old, something like that. Also, look at Mercury to the Moon. Mercury is, well, it's more like almost 4 degrees from the Moon, so it's a bit out. So that is something to consider. And this leads to the technique that I'm alluding to, solar arc directions. So these are the solar arc directions for Hunter Biden at the precise moment on December the 18th, 1972, when his mother, when he had this accident, and so we can sort of see how close things actually were. So there's Pluto. It was actually 3 arc minutes off. These are the directions for the moment of the accident. So Pluto was actually 3 arc minutes off the Aries point, which is pretty close. Then there is Sun. There's natal Sun. Venus was at 1811. So progressed Sun was actually at 1827. Was a bit beyond, but not very far beyond. So I think that's that is good. That is good enough. And then there's Saturn. Solar arc directed Saturn was at 554 Taurus, and his Jupiter was at 537 Scorpio. So it's good enough. It's close enough. These things don't often work exactly. They're not. But they're just talking about that rough period of time, that window of disaster, which would have been late. I would have said late 1972, early 1973. And so I think that ties into it, and I think that that explains a huge amount. Now, as far as Hunter Biden and the laptop is concerned, now, I must admit, I find the whole story just really complicated. I'm not one of these people that obsesses about this kind of thing, and I'm not really someone who's really into conspiracy theories. But I think what is relevant with Hunter Biden is that when we think about Ukraine, the beginning of 2014, we had this coup, really, in Ukraine, which was obviously supported and to an extent engineered by the United States in the beginning of 2014, where an elected president was overthrown, basically forced out, and America was able to start to put in its people into Ukraine. So that was when Obama was president, and then 2 months later, April 2014, Hunter Biden was appointed to the board of this Ukrainian energy company, Burisma, and his father, vice president, Uh, that's that's serious. He was paid quite a lot of money. I think he was paid something like $1 million a year. Why would Burisma want to pay Hunter Biden $1 million a year? Why would some American lawyer who knows nothing about Ukraine or very little about Ukraine, why do they want to pay him so much money? Oh, do they think he was a good lawyer? I don't know. But one would assume that their thinking would be that they can use Hunter Biden to influence U.S. To influence U.S. policy towards Ukraine, and if you're an energy company, well, yeah, or at least U.S. policy towards them. So yeah, so you can understand the motive there, and so then you've got the whole laptop thing. So I really don't know the details, but he took his laptop, or it was alleged that he took his laptop into a repair place, and the story got out and about what sort of things were on the laptop. And I think one of the things that was supposedly on the laptop was a meeting between, I think, someone from Burisma and Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. That was the story. And the New York Post put something out on this. The story broke in a New York Post. I don't know the time it broke. I've gone to midnight on October the 14th, 2020. So this is the chart. This is the chart of for the day that New York Post broke the story about the laptop. What's interesting here is you've got an exact Sun-Mars opposition on that day. And it's interesting that this Sun-Mars opposition was exactly on Hunter Biden's Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, this raises the question: what impact did that day have on Hunter Biden? So let's put the charts kind of side by side. So there is Hunter Biden's chart in the middle, and there is the New York Post article on the outside. So what I'm most interested in here is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So there was a relatively close Saturn-Pluto conjunction at the time in 2020 when the article came out. And it sort of hits Hunter Biden's moon. So you can see that Hunter Biden, there's his moon, 2357 Capricorn. This moon that I think is the author of so many of Hunter Biden's problems, particularly as the moon is semi-square his midheaven. Now, Saturn, you can see that Saturn and Pluto are exactly 3 degrees apart. So if you want to know the midpoint, you just add 1.5 degrees to the position of Pluto. So the Saturn-Pluto midpoint is 24 degrees 1 minute Capricorn. And Hunter Biden's moon is at 2357 Capricorn. So the transiting Saturn-Pluto midpoint is exactly on Hunter Biden's moon, and it is therefore exactly semi-square his midheaven. So that Saturn-Pluto aspect has caused really absolute chaos to Hunter Biden's chart. I think, I think that aspect has really, really hit the most vulnerable point in his horoscope. Maybe one could say that if this was just some story, just some made-up conspiracy, right-wing conspiracy, would it have really hit him so much? I mean, one could deny it, one could find it, but there's been all this forensic analysis of the laptop, and the story is not going away. And I think the general consensus now even in the mainstream media, that it actually was Hunter Biden's laptop, and I think the chart really illustrates this. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to actually finish by looking at Hunter Biden's Vedic chart. I should also say about this chart that there was a T-square. There's this T-square on when the New York Post article came out. Mars is exactly opposition the Sun. There's Saturn Uranus on the T. And the Saturn, so his T-square is hitting his moon, and it's also on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. It really was an extremely difficult day for Hunter Biden. Okay, so I want to now look at Hunter Biden's. I want to look at his Vedic chart. So because I can now use. Look at his Vedic chart, because I now have a time of birth. If you haven't got a time of birth, it really is pretty much impossible to use Vedic astrology. A time of birth really is important. So let's just have a quick look at his Vedic chart. Now, what I want to mention is the fact that it does seem that Hunter Biden's luck is perhaps running out a little here. So from a Vedic perspective, Hunter Biden's moon is a bit of a train wreck. It remains in Capricorn. You can see that his moon in his Vedic astrology is at 030 Capricorn. Everything goes back about 23, 24 degrees. And the moon is in the 8th house. And the moon is conjunct the sun. And in Vedic astrology, aspects, conjunctions are done by sign. So if something is in the same sign, it's in the same house, and it's potentially in aspect. So there's the sun conjunct his moon in the 8th house. So his moon is in real trouble there. And but again, in Vedic astrology, I think the moon is the natural ruler of the mother, the moon. And it's in very early degrees, and there are different ways of in Vedic astrology of categorizing the planets in terms of the life cycle. And there's Hunter Biden's moon. You can read across, and it's one way of looking at it describes it as being dead. It's dead because it's in really early degrees. That's why it's dead. I mean, it's not unusual to have dead planets. You can have planets in youth, adolescence, old age, but his moon is dead. I had a friend who was really quite into Vedic astrology, and he was really into, he thought it is dead. Yeah, it's really bad. Maybe in Vedic, in Biden's chart, that dead moon is not good. As far as other things going on, he's got Sadhisati. Now, Sadhisati is something we all have every 29 and a half years. We have 7 year. There's a 7-year Sadhisati period every 29 and a half years. So basically, quarter of our life is in Sadhisati, and Sadhisati can be extremely unlucky. A lot of bad luck connected with Sadhisati, and so you can see that right now. I know that Saturn is in Pisces in Western astrology, but right now it's in Aquarius in the East. And so his Sadhisati, for the last, I think in about 2017, Hunter Biden went into this Sadhisati period. This 7 years of bad luck started for him, and he's still very much in it. And it's at its worst. And what Sadhisati is, it's when Saturn is in the same sign as the natal moon, the sign after the natal moon and the sign before the natal moon. So the Sadhisati period would be when Saturn entered sidereal Vedic Sagittarius, would keep going and through Aquarius, through Capricorn, where his moon is, and then move on into Aquarius. So Saturn then moves into the sign of his moon, and that is the worst period of Sadhisati. And his Sadhisati, that Saturn went into sidereal Capricorn. In other words, it started to conjunct his moon. I believe in June 20. I think it was in June 2020, early part of 2020, and that was a time when the New York Post article came out. Now, as far as periods in his life is concerned, he is in his Jupiter Dasha, which started in 2009 and ends in 2025. I mean, his Jupiter is in the 5th house. That's very fortunate. So overall, this Jupiter period is fortunate, and I suppose 2009 would have been particularly fortunate because his father has just been made vice president because Obama had won the 2008 election. I mean, do you think Burisma would have been interested in him if Obama had lost the 2008 election? I don't think so. So his father winning the election was probably very fortunate for him on many levels. And then we go through the various periods, and you can see that on September the 12th, 2020, he was in the Jupiter Mahadasha, the big dasha, the big period, which starts in 2009 to 2025. But then he moved into the sub-period of his moon. And just less than a month later, the New York Post article came out. And his moon, as we've already discussed, is a train wreck in his western chart and his eastern chart. So when he goes into this subdasha of his moon, we can see the train wreck start to really manifest. And that's probably where his luck started to run out. And we can see right now, he's still got all these indictments and whatever. Now it's really piling up for him and his family and whatever. It's looking increasingly difficult. The last subdasha of his Jupiter Mahadasha started last December. And so that's Jupiter main dasha and Rahu subdasha. And, right now Saturn is in Aquarius. It's conjunct his natal Rahu, so it's really starting to get really difficult. And very often, the last sub-period of a big period is the thing where things really start to unravel in a big way. But when do things get really bad for Hunter Biden? Jupiter is still a fortunate planet in his chart. It must surely provide a certain amount of protection. I mean, he's got Jupiter in the 5th. I mean, the 5th house is a fortunate house in Vedic astrology. Well, his Jupiter period finally ends on May the 14th, 2025, and he moves into his Saturn, big Saturn major period. And his Saturn is in Aries. It is in its fall, and his Saturn is really pretty unfortunate in his chart, and so I'm thinking about the Hunter Biden. It may be that things really may not completely unravel for him until 2025. Of course, that will be after the election, but still, this final subdasha, Jupiter Rahu, it's tough. It really is tough because Saturn is aspecting his Rahu. I should say that in I mentioned that in Western astrology, the fourth house, in Western astrology, the fourth house rules the father. In the Vedic astrology, it's actually the ninth house. So he's got Saturn in his ninth house, and he's got Rahu in his ninth house. So this is kind of how it's kind of linking with him and his father, and Saturn is causing his problems, and he's got his, from 2022 to May 25, the last sub-dasha of his Jupiter dasha is ruled by Rahu. So that's when the problems are piling up, and then, as I said, 2025, he moves into his Saturn major period, and I think that's going to be really difficult for him. There's the question: will his father still be president? What if a Republican is in the White House? What impact is that going to have on him? What impact is that going to have on his father? Will his father still be around? I don't know. Well, I should know, but I haven't really looked at the matter. I mean, as I've already looked at Joe Biden's Western chart, and I think things are looking really, really bad for Joe Biden ever since his birthday. But I've already discussed that in a previous video. So that's a few thoughts on Hunter Biden's horoscope. I hope you found that interesting. If you like this video, then like it. And if you're not subscribed, and you think I'm providing what do they say, value to your life, then maybe you want to subscribe to my channel. And yes, if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.